night, and our guest today, very special guest today, is Ariel Gabizon, a man who needs no introduction, but if you've been living under zkRock for the last few years, Ariel is a great contributor to zk space, co-author of Plonk, famously found a bug in mathematics of zcash, and plenty other contributions on optimizations of zero-knowledge proof. So without further ado, please welcome our guest who came to us specially for this presentation from Krakow. So thank you, Ariel.
Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, let me move this. I think it'll be better. Okay, let's see. Oh no, this is not connected. Okay. So, are people here? Are you familiar with zk-SNARKs, with protocols like, like who knows Grot 16? Okay. Who knows Plonk?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So. Yeah, so I'm gonna try to explain to you this thing called this GKR method, and I'll tell you, for those who will still be here in half an hour, you will see what GKR stands for, so you have something to look forward to. So it's actually an old technique, but it's like it's found a lot of interest recently in zk-SNARKs. And please ask questions at any point. There's not too many slides. Okay. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to start with just a few basic things about what's called multilinear functions, and who's heard of SumCheck protocol, or okay. That's the last time you'll have to raise your hand. That's no more. And then we'll talk a little about this GKR method, which is like a fancy use of SumCheck. Yeah. So right. So let's get started. Right, so what do we mean by multilinear polynomials? We mean just polynomials that are linear in each variable. Right, so, and here's one example that will, yeah, actually, do we have the thing for this, the little thing? Maybe, because I think I'm going to hide the slides all the time if I do it like this.
Or for switching the slides, or
yeah, for switching. Do we have the little thing?
Oh shit, it's missing. Can't you? Oh no, this is not for switching.
Is it this thing?
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's this thing. All right. I used to be like a theoretician, but now I can do stuff like this by myself. Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at one example of multilinear functions that will come up a lot. Is, gotta be delicate with it. Is what's called the equality function. So right, it's a So again, multilinear function means that the degree in each variable is at most 1. Right, so as you can see, that's true here because right, xi appears only in one factor in this product, and right, you can do a little exercise and see that this really is the equality function if our x and y's are binary. Right, so let's say we had just n was 1, so we had only like one such factor, right? So for example, right, and x and y were just, you know, single elements. So right, if x and y are both 1, this will be 1, and this will be 0. And if they're both 0, then, right, this will be 0 and this will be 1. But if they're different, then both factors will be 0. Then if they're 1 is 0 and 1 is 1, then this factor will be 0. So, right, that's why if you have x and y that are different in some coordinate, that coordinate will zero out this product. So, nice example of multilinear function that we'll see if will come up today. The equality function. And you'll see it a lot in papers. You'll see this all the time. If you look papers on SumCheck, you'll see it all the time. So that's one multilinear function. And another very common multilinear function is you take the EQ function, but you just fix the first n variables to some binary x, and leave the y variable alive. And so these like this sets of polynomials Lxy, we can call them like the multilinear Lagranges. Why do we call them that? Because they're the indicator function for in the Boolean cube for this little x. Right. So L little x of little x will be 1, which is from the property of the equality function, and L little x of any other y will be 0.
What's the intuition for this? Is it like interpolation?
For this?
For the multilinear Lagranges.
So what's the intuition you mean? Why do I call them multilinear Lagranges? Well, just because Lagrange polynomials, like in the univariate world, we call the Lagrange polynomials these polynomials that, like, the ith one will be 1 on the ith point of like some subgroup and 0 on all the other points of the subgroup. So in my head, since I live in univariate world most of the time, Lagrange polynomials is the same as indicator functions, right? So these are sort of multilinear indicator functions. They, like L of little x will only be 1 on the little x. Of course, just in the Boolean inputs, when you put here other things than 0, 1, then it will just be crazy numbers. Okay. So that's multilinear polynomials. And
That's a fancy way to store x.
yeah. And now, some basics of SumCheck. So think of some prover that has an n-variate polynomial f. F now is not necessarily multilinear, but say it's in what's called individual degree is very small. It's at most 3. So in every variable, it has degree at most 3. So what is SumCheck? So in SumCheck, the prover wants to show the verifier that the sum of this f, the values of this f, over the Boolean cube is 0, or usually 0. The 0 can be some c. So that's what we want to prove. Yeah.
Why do we care about low degree?
Well, 3 here is a little arbitrary. I wanted by 3 to emphasize that the individual degree is small, and that's where like the efficiency of SumCheck works well when the individual degree is small, and I chose 3 to symbolize small.
So what exactly is individual?
So individual degree is, for example, if I look at x squared times y, so the total degree is 3, but the individual degree is 2.
Gotcha.
Right? So the total degree, if you have many variables, right, you can look at x1 squared times x2 squared times x3 squared and so forth. So the individual degree will be, the total degree will be like 2n, but the individual degree will be just 2. And yeah, and an important point is sum check is very efficient when the individual degrees are small. Okay. So this is the sort of claims that we want to prove with sum check. And so, and how, I'm not going to show you the sum check protocol because either you know it already, so that's not going to help you, or you don't know it and it'll just confuse you to see it. It's simple, but it's confusing the first 80 times you see it. And I don't want to be the first of your 80 times. But if you will insist, I will show you later on the blackboard the sum check protocol, assuming I'm able to do it. But what I want to, because sometimes people during these 80 times, they can go through it without understanding what the sum check gives you. So, and this is sort of a modern interpretation of the sum check protocol. So the sum check protocol, what it does really, what the way like in modern SNARK world we think about it a lot, is that it's actually a reduction from a claim like this to a claim about just one evaluation of f. So after the prover and verifier run the sum check protocol between them, then the verifier will say, okay, I will be convinced of this as long as you just convince me of this, of one evaluation of f, where this r is some random r that was chosen by the verifier during the protocol. So here, this is sort of the modern way to think of the sum check that is very useful in recent papers. If you would look at the classic, sum check like in old lecture notes, then simply the last stage of the sum check protocol would be now the prover shows this, but yeah, again, in modern papers, it's very useful to think of the protocol as just a reduction from this claim to a claim that looks like this. And why the reason why people are some people are very bullish on are very bullish on the sum check protocol is that this reduction doesn't require the prover to do any fast Fourier transforms or commit to any other polynomials. If you don't know what that means, we're going to talk about polynomial commitments pretty soon. But that is sort of that, these heavy operations that appear in what's called in the univariate approach to SNARKs, they don't appear in sum check, and that's why people like sum check. Okay. Yeah.
Would this protocol work if we don't have a field but a ring? Like the polynomial f would be defined over ring.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think you just need a Schwarz-Zippel lemma.
For rings.
Yeah. Yeah, right? I mean, I think there's some work on that for some rings. Okay, so right. So why? So why do we want to do sum checks? So the main case is zero testing. So usually in SNARKs, we don't want to prove that a sum is zero. We actually want to prove that f is zero on all points of some space. So that comes up much more in SNARKs. And the idea is that this is reducible to sum check. You can reduce this to sum check. Why? Because what we can do is, like, the verifier can choose some random challenge beta. And now we're going to, instead of f, we're going to look at this function f prime, which is simply this eq beta of x times f of x. And now, what we're going to do is, what you can see is that, well, obviously, right, if f is 0 on all of the cube, then this sum will also be 0. And what you can easily check is that if
have dimension n?
Oh, nice catch. Yes, okay. Good catch. And what you can show, basically, because these multilinear Lagranges, as I call them, are linearly independent, you can show that if on some x f was not 0, then with very high probability, this sum will be non-zero. So that's right. That's one main application, is that we can reduce zero testing that comes up very naturally in SNARKs to sum check. And again, versus the sort of the other main way people do zero testing, univariate quotients, there's no FFTs involved, and there's no commitments involved. Okay, so now we need to talk for a second about polynomial commitments. This is a term that was first introduced in this Kates of Goldberg work for univariates, but today we're concentrating on multivariate multilinears. So what is the idea of a polynomial commitment scheme? Probably most of you have seen it. I'd ask how many have seen it, but I told you wouldn't have to raise your hand again. So here, the idea is P has some n-variate multilinear polynomial, and a polynomial commitment scheme, this enables the prover. I mean, this polynomial could be huge. This enables the prover to send a very short commitment to the polynomial. Like in many schemes, the commitment is just like, the polynomial could have, a billion coefficients, but the commitment is just one elliptic curve point. It's like, 70 bytes or something like that, 64 bytes or something like that. And then what is the cool thing? That at any time later, after the commitment has been sent, the verifier can choose some random evaluation point. And then, so P can tell the verifier, okay, well, you're interested in f of r, so f of r is equal to z. And of course, right, there's the big chicken and egg problem that the prover, after the v sends r, could say, okay, for me it's good that you think that f of r is 5. But the very cool thing about polynomial commitment schemes is that P can prove to, sorry, this should be R, to the verifier that Z is really f of R for the f I had in mind during commitment time. I haven't changed the polynomial after you sent me the opening point. So this is what's called polynomial commitment schemes. We can have a tiny commitment to a huge polynomial, and then at any time later, I don't need to open the whole polynomial. I can just ask for f of r, and I can get an answer I know is provably correct. Right? So that's polynomial commitment schemes. And so there's been a lot of activity recently on, so the original polynomial commitment schemes in this work, KZG, were for univariate polynomials, and a little later there was a sort of what you could call the more straightforward generalization of KZG to multivariates. That was not super efficient, like the verifier needs to do a lot of pairings. But there's been a lot of work recently on getting more efficient commitment schemes for multilinear polynomials. And here is a sequence of works that you can check out on ePrint. Okay, so the zero testing, how does it typically look like in SNARK land? So usually the idea is that the prover has several polynomials. He sends the verifier the commitments to all these polynomials. And the prover wants to show the verifier that so some expression in these polynomials is identically 0. Right? So for example, that f1 times f2 minus f3 is always 0. Right? So, right, you can think of this intuitively as like if the f's are encoding wires in a circuit and the f1 and f2 are inputs to multiplication gates, then this sort of is a way of showing that, okay, the multiplication gate always acts correctly. Okay, so GKR, it stands for Goldwasser, Kalai, Rothblum. This was a paper called Delegating Computation, Interactive Proofs for Muggles. And in sort of describing like what's gotten people interested recently reinterested in this paper, is sort of you can think of it like this. So right. So we were saying for this zero testing case, the conventional thing to do is you commit to some polynomials, and then you want to show that some expression in them is identically 0. So you can do that, say using sum check. But say now you want to see can you take this whole thing further? If when these days we're really obsessed about better and better prover efficiency. So you can ask, well, okay, that's good, but committing to polynomials is expensive. Is there a way to use sum check for polynomials when we don't even have their commitments? So this is the sort of question that has gotten people enthusiastic about GKR. And GKR, it lets you do something like this. So you can think of GKR as like iterative sum check or recursive sum check. And what happens in GKR, I'm going to give you a simpler example than the one in the original paper. So basically the idea is, say we don't have a commitment to the polynomial we're doing a sum check over. So right, what's going to happen? We're going to do the sum check reduction, and then we're going to get to the point where we need to evaluate this polynomial at a random point. Right? So if we had a commitment to it, we could do it, but we don't. So what are we going to do instead? Well, this claim about the fr equals v, about the random evaluation of the polynomial, we're going to reduce that claim to another sum check about a different polynomial. And we'll see an example of this now, like very soon. So this is the way I think about GKR, that it's this sequence of iterative reductions where you have some original claim which is about a sum of a polynomial. You use sum check to reduce it to a claim about some random evaluation of the same polynomial. But now you're going to, this is where the GKR comes in, you're going to reduce this claim to another claim about a sum of another polynomial, and you're going to reduce that to another claim about a random evaluation of this polynomial, and you're going to keep doing that until, so where does it end? Until it ends when you've managed to get to a claim about a polynomial you do have a commitment to, so that you can actually do the evaluation.
What's the use case for this?
So we're going to see a use case, an example right now. Yeah.
So during this course of action, do I reduce the degree of polynomials, or no? It's just like a modification of like polynomial. The degree remains the same.
Well, I think it's best to see the example. But again, the motivation is to reduce the amount of values we need to commit to. That's the motive. That's the motivation.
Amount of polynomials we need to commit to.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it as amount of values because you can always have one bigger polynomial, right? If you think of a polynomial of size n as a degree n as a way to commit to n values, then yeah, I think it's more correct to think of it as reduce the number of values you need to commit to. So let's look. The original GKR paper is for someone who's not very comfortable with sum check. I think it's a little hard. So we're going to look at this simpler example from a paper of Justin Thaler. So we've got here a very simple circuit. It's just a tree of multiplication gates, right? So we start with 4 inputs, and we just compute their product in this tree. So now suppose the prover has a commitment to some bivariate f, and v has the commitment to it, and oops, gotta exactly, and now P wants to prove to V the correctness of like what is the product of all of F's values on the Boolean cube, right? So we're thinking of F as encoding the inputs the inputs to this circuit. So you could think of it as like P has committed to the bottom, the values at the bottom layer of this circuit, and using only that commitment, P wants to prove the output value of the circuit.
What were y1 and y2? What was that?
So that's just what I call the variables, right? So it's just a bivariate polynomial, so I just call the variables y1, y2.
So the A's, they are not binary, right?
No. So right. So the A's, no, the A's could be any value in the field. Like A1 is f. You're going to put inside it f of 0, 0, which can be anything in the field.
So how do we do it?
So excellent question. Just what I was going to get to. So let's define the multilinear, let's call it intermediate layer function, G. So everything here is a little trivial because the example is so small, but I hope you'll get the idea. So G is sort of the multilinear function that encodes the values in this middle layer. So G of 0 is just going to be the product of the first two f's and values of f, and G of 1 the product of the other two. So, right, if we go back here, just if we would have put, when we put in the bottom layer, we put the values of f, so it just means that in the middle layer, we'll get the values of G. Right, so our claim of like the product of all the f's is U. It's the same as just this claim. And an exercise you can do at home is you can reduce. I mean, this is a very since it's just two values, it's maybe it's a very special case of subcheck. But so we our claim now is about it's a claim about two values of G. You can see that you can do you can. It's not too hard to see. I'm skipping over it because it's not the main point that I'll get to next. You can see that you can reduce this claim about G0, G1 to some evaluating G of R for some random R. Just trust me on that. And now, again, if we had a commitment, like sort of the traditional way to do something like this would be like the prover would also commit to G, and then he would show somehow that really he's committed to the right G by some consistency check between G and F. And then once we have a commitment to G, right, polynomial commitments, we can evaluate G of R. But again, our goal now is GKR is to avoid needing to compute and send the commitment to G. So that is the punchline here. Okay, so a small interlude. we can represent any multilinear function using this EQ function we talked about earlier. So, right, this is what EQ looked like. And what I claim to you is now take any h that is multilinear, then you can write h as this combination of the what we call wait, is this what we call the? You can write it as this sum over the EQ. This combination of the EQ values. Right? Like what? Okay. Why is this true? Right. First of all, this function here on the right-hand side, it's a multilinear function. Right? Why? Because EQ is multilinear, and it's just right now these x's are constants, so h of x is constant. So this thing on the right-hand side, it's a multilinear function. And it agrees with h everywhere on the cube. Why does someone see why that's correct, that it agrees with h everywhere on the cube? For every x and 0 1 to the n? I'm saying if I put, what I mean by is if I substitute here something in the cube, in the Boolean cube, then
The sum has one element.
exactly, right? If I so I'm thinking of R as like as general, but right, if I put a Boolean R, like the R that's a Boolean vector, then right, everything will disappear except EQ like RR, which will be 1, and then here we'll have h of R. Exactly. Okay, so now back to where we were. Okay, so now, let's represent G via the EQ function. So right, G is we were talking about so G is like in our little example, G is just univariate, right? So it's just EQ_R0 times the value of G at 0, which right we said is these two, plus EQ_R1 times the value of G at 1, which right we said is this. So this little sum, we can think of it as a sum over this function f prime, where what is f prime? It's just EQ with this fixed to R, the first thing fixed to R, times f of x0 times f of x1. So I'm going to give you, we're actually very close to the end, so I'm just going to give you a minute or two to.
This is why you need the degrees of the tree?
A degree of
Of the tree?
yeah. So in this talk we never go beyond we exactly get to 3. Yeah.
So the complexity is like fun in plus 1 from multiplication gain. And going back to
You mean the complexity? You mean the individual degree?
for sorry, like
Yeah.
right? And the fact that we have like three elements here comes from the fact that we have this EQ and like two inputs to a gate.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
if we have more inputs to a gate?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. The individual degree in GKR is always fan n plus 1. Yep. I mean, if people will be eager. So, yeah, the original GKR paper, it didn't look at this simple tree of multiplications. It looked at a circuit where every layer has an arbitrary combination of additions and multiplications. So, if people will be very eager, I will try on the blackboard to do the original GKR paper example, but. Maybe depending on if the pizza will be delayed and people will need to be distracted from their hunger, I will. But okay, well, I'll give you another minute just to see you follow what's going on here, and please ask questions because we're very close to the end of the slides.
If you were to make an addition gate, would it be as simple as taking the sum of f1 to taking the sum there instead of the
So addition gate, you mean now it's just a tree of additions, or you mean a circuit where there's both?
let's say it's mixed, because it looks like it wouldn't be that hard to mix it even.
Right. So you're encouraging me to write on the board what the original GKR. I will do it in the end if you'll still want it. But is this any questions about this example?
The particular slide seems to be understandable.
Great. So the point here is we're able to express evaluating G. Right. Why were we able to? We were able to do this because G. I mean, again, when the context is right, we have some circuit, and F is the values were on the bottom layer of the circuit, and G is the values of at the next layer of the circuit. So because that makes some relation between F and G, and because of that relation, we're able to express evaluating G as a sum in F. And then now, so now we've expressed evaluating G as a sum in F. So now we want to prove what's the value of this sum. So this is that chain of errors I showed you. So now using the sum check protocol, we can reduce evaluating G of R to evaluating F prime of R2 for some R2 that will be chosen during the sum check protocol. And and now in this next sum check protocol, we're going to need to evaluate F prime of R2, right? Which looks like this. But now here in this little example, we've already reached sort of the bottom of the sequence of arrows because, EQ, right? EQ is like a publicly known function. It's also very efficient, so the verifier can just compute EQ itself. And since F, we already have the commitment, so P can ask just, P can just prove these values. And yeah. Yeah, so that,
Few more moments.
yeah. Because so again, this sort of I left as an exercise. We assume it's sufficient to calculate G of R. Now we've expressed G of R as a sum over this function f prime. Okay, good. Yeah, good. So now this sum check protocol that I didn't explain, and you need to go through 80 times to feel comfortable with it. What it gives you is it gives you a way to reduce claims about the sum of f prime to a claim about a random evaluation of f prime. So using this magic sum check protocol, we reduce this claim to just needing to evaluate f prime at some random R2.
So the magic is producing R2. I'm guessing producing PQ is pretty easy.
You know, part of the magic, a big part of the magic is how the sum check protocol works. Yeah. Yeah. And part of the sum check protocol, this R2, yeah, will appear there. Yeah. Yeah. The magic is producing, yeah, you can say it like that. The magic is producing R2.
And so a large level, high level use case might be that this is so much faster than the commitments that you could have something like incrementally verifiable computation and only snapshot every n steps and commit to that. Is that how you can think about it?
Well, I mean, maybe you can think about incremental, but usually how people think about it is so think of instead of just this small circuit, you had a huge circuit with like many layers and many gates at each layer. So sort of the traditional SNARK approach, for every gate at any layer, you need to commit to its value. Like essentially what's going on is you're committing to a value for each gate anywhere in the circuit. So when you prove output value of a circuit using GKR, you only need to commit to the bottom layer, to the inputs.
Oh, so you could apply this to any SNARK then?
Yeah, basically yes. So when you dig down, so we looked here at a very, very simple circuit so GKR performs very, very well on these simple circuits. When it's an arbitrary combination of, say, addition, multiplication gates, or even custom gates, it's yet to be, I think, examined how well it performs. And all this is like, even when it performs well, its advantages in terms of prover time. In terms of proof size, it's not as good as like KZG SNARKs. It has larger proofs, so usually you need to like then recursively verify it. So yeah.
With two openings for that commitment to F.
Yeah.
How many do you need as a function of the number of layers? Like how does it
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, how GKR looks like, I mean, also for this simple circuit, but also for a general like circuit, is every time you have these two evaluations, but then you do, this is like the same as this exercise that, where was it? This exercise I talked about. So basically, in GKR, at every layer, you actually have these two evaluations, and then you do this step of reducing the two evaluations to one. Like it's sort of like you you take a line through the two evaluations and a random point on that line, and so you can reduce two evaluations to one, and really in GKR you need to do that at every step. So you only end up with one, yeah, in the end, that you actually need to open. One or two, but not like 2D or something.
So if the circuit was deeper, you would just run another round of GKR, and then you would end up in the same place.
Yeah. However deep the circuit, and when you run general GKR, for every layer, you do this step of reducing two evaluations to one. Yeah. Yeah, and then at the end you can either open two or do another reduction.
It doesn't sound that efficient.
It doesn't sound what?
It sounds like such a huge saving then. If you need to do the whole thing for every pair. Any intuition why this is why is this more efficient for small circuits?
Well, I'm not sure I followed. It's more efficient because of the you don't commit to the intermediate layers, or.
It sounds like it's still quite a bit of work for every intermediate layer, but these are so much cheaper that the overhead is worth it, I assume.
This work I was talking about now, it's not that you need to do an entire GKR to reduce the 2 to 1. There's a simple trick to reduce that.
I think the only way for us to finally get it is the fully worked example.
Yeah, with the bigger circuit, I guess.
Yeah, with the real
Okay. Right. So general GKR is yeah, you have a circuit. And any other questions before we? So you have a
Asking some
Yeah.
creative questions. It seems we understand surprisingly a lot.
yeah, it's great. It's a nice surprise.
So maybe I just say aloud.
Yeah.
Those are simple statements, but
Yeah.
So basically GKR allows you to have a trusted setup of the size of the input.
Oh yeah. That's also true. Yeah.
So you don't, which is important because trusted setups are big and taking time and space and memory, and so like practically those are difficult to handle, right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Run your prover in the browser or something, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
So it effectively makes it so your trusted setup define not the size of your constraint system, but the size of the input. So this is
Yes.
already sounds like a big advancement.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But there is trusted setup.
Yeah, like if it's long, it's trusted.
Well, so if
KGG, right? So
if for the commitment scheme you would use something that requires a trusted setup, then the size of it would be like the input or the bottom layer. Yeah. So general GKR is like you have now a circuit with D layers, and let's just sort of focus on. So let's think of this big circuit. Let's say we're just looking at 2 layers out of the D. And the wires, we think of the wires, they always go only from layer I minus 1 to I. Wires only go up, 1 layer up. And right, so here, say this is like, we think of this as like layer I, and this is layer I minus 1. And we think of like, so say here we had some plus, and here we had some multiplies. And now the inputs, and let's think fan-in 2, that was in the original paper. You can have larger fan-in, but let's say it's 2. And now, it's not a nice tree. So the inputs of, say, this multiplication gate, they can be any two nodes in the previous layer, right? So the circuit looks something like this. And like we had those F and G. So again, we're going to think. So if we if this circuit, if we we feed in some inputs. Say we have a commitment to a function f, and we feed in as inputs the values of f in the bottom layer. So that's going to induce values at each layer. So similarly to what we did with G, we're going to think of a multilinear function gi for each layer I, that its values on the cube are the values of the gates at layer I. So here we have some multilinear function gi. So x is, now think of it as many variables, and there's going to be some function here gi plus 1x that describes the values on the I plus 1th layer. And when you try to do a similar thing to what we did here, you again, what it boils down to is you're going to have some random r. Again, r here is a vector, and you're going to need to be able to express gi plus 1 of r as some sum over gi. So for this purpose, you're going to need these two, you're going to have these two, you can call them selector functions that come with the circuit. So you're going to have an add and mul. So add, and this is really add I, because it could be different for each layer. So add I x, y, z, not to be mixed necessarily with this x. So add I x, y, z. So now think of it, this is like each one is like so it's like a 3 invariant function. Add I x, y, z is going to be 1. Let me just, if and only if x, y at layer I are inputs to z. Let me just erase this d right here, d layers. So add x, y, z is 1 if and only if x, y at layer I are inputs to, or I did I minus 1. So at layer I minus 1 are inputs to z at layer I, and z is addition gate. And now, okay, and it's going to be, and it's 0 otherwise. It's 0 otherwise. Okay, so is it? Think a minute what this add function is, because that's the crucial thing to understand. So it's a function. I'm thinking of denoting the gates by say the Boolean vectors, by say there's 2 to the n gates at each layer. I'm identifying them with the Boolean vectors. And I'm saying this is 1 if when I plug in 2 x, y from this layer and z from this layer, it's going to be 1 if and only if these are the inputs of z, and z is an addition gate. and otherwise it's going to be 0. And this work? Okay, and now, right, we can define mol I x, y, z similarly. Right, does that seem clear? Okay, and now, actually I do have room here. Okay, all right. Okay, so now, and now you can write gi plus 1 of r as sum over x, y, z in 0, 1 to the n of what? Of, I think it's like add I, x, y, z times gi, or like gi minus 1 of x, gi minus 1 of y, oh, I think, right, good. I want to add, wait a second, I want to add them, yeah, but wait, gi of oh, good, okay, wait, so let's say I'm expressing gi minus 1 as gi. Let me just be consistent here. So this is I, and this is I minus 1. Exactly, thanks. I want to add them. So exactly. So it's this. Wait, so why do I even need the z? I'm suddenly missing something here.
I think z should be your parameter to gi.
Oh, no, it's my parameter to EQ. It's my parameter to EQ, I think. I think it's this. Yeah, I mean, it is my parameter to GI, but here it's my parameter to EQ. Mol I x, y, z gi minus 1x gi minus 1 y times EQ R z. I think I got that right. And here you're again, when you do a sum check over all this thing, you're gonna why do you end up with 2 values? Because you're gonna have some r for the x and some other r for the y, and that's why you're gonna end up needing to. Anyway, I'll let you stare at this for. Yeah. So here there's 2 options. So in the original GKR paper, they didn't do it for general circuits. They did it for, they called it something log space uniform circuits. So they assumed these add and mul functions. It's a circuit where these add and mul functions, they're very easy to compute. If you want to do it for a general circuit, you would have to actually commit to the add and mul functions and open them at the. Actually, yeah.
They can be like part of your trusted setup.
Yeah, you would need to commit to them, and yeah, and maybe you need to do some work to make sure you only need to. Yeah, and maybe actually some work needs to be done so you don't have to open them in the middle stages, only in the. Actually, yeah, I need to think about it for. Okay, let's assume the add and mul are easy for the verifier to compute himself. That's the original, how it is in the original paper, and
It seems
they would.
You can basically construct the Lagrange basis over the x, y, z's. There should only be two values that are 1, so it's basically the sum of two Lagranges.
I'm not sure I follow. The add function is for a general circuit. It can be very complicated.
It has a term for every wire
For
at
every
the current
wire,
layer.
yes. For every wire between the two layers.
I think in the way people are trying to use GKR now, the add and the mol are the same between every two layers, and that makes things easier.
Can you say that again? The add and mol.
In applications people are trying to do now, I think these functions add I, mol I, they're the same for every I.
What would be such an application?
Well, I think people are trying to do like Ketchuk with GKR, and then right in Ketchuk you have 24 rounds that are all the same.
I'm guessing it will be another candidate.
Yeah, I think the consensus people were trying to do Poseidon with.
It's not general purpose. You can, so the state of the GKR is not like you can reduce any.
So the thing that now brought GKR back to like fashion was this Lasso paper, where there it's this simple circuit which is a tree of malts. It's yet, I think, TBD how well it behaves for more complicated circuits. The people are, I think, working on it.
To be determined.
TBD, yeah, to be determined.
So we assume here that you can divide this circuit into layers.
Yes,
And this is also like an assumption.
definitely.
How realistic this assumption is?
I don't know. Again, the application that now brought it to fashion was where it's this tree of malts, where it's not they do everything with GKR, just the Planck permutation where you need to commit to partial, just that they replaced with GKR. So
The complexity is linear in the depth of the circuit.
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of fancy things. I think so. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think it's pizzas are here.